Hi, everyone. We are so excited to welcome you to this event. Hopefully you're familiar with the Sanford C. Bernstein and Co. Center for Leadership and Ethics, but I want to tell you a little bit more about the Student Leadership and Ethics Board. The goal of the board is to foster a culture and safeguard a tradition of principled leadership throughout the Columbia Business School community. The board fulfills its purpose by developing and implementing and monitoring programs that cultivate leadership, build character, and promote ethical decision-making, which in turn enable Columbia Business School students to become productive, moral, and caring participants in their companies and communities. Today's discussion will feature two prominent fashion industry leaders. We'll focus on real-life ethical issues and the consequences of business decisions. The panelists will discuss how the fashion industry can be a frontrunner in sustainability, despite its reputation, and social responsibility, and how these learnings can be applied to other industries. They will also touch upon tensions between business operations in our globalized world, while attempting to consider impacts all regional communities and stakeholders face. Finally, I want to introduce our moderator. Donald Bradford is the Senior Director of Menswear at Calvin Klein. As head of the design team, Donald's mission is to steer the brand into being socially responsible while keeping the design aesthetics of the brand. Donald is currently an EMBA 2022 at Columbia Business School. He came into the program with almost 2 decades of fashion design experience, designing for a handful of well-known brands, including Donna Karan, Alexander Wang, and Calvin Klein. He has worked directly with factories all around the world and has firsthand experience dealing with ethical dilemmas involving industrial globalization. And for those of you who've ever been in a classroom with Donald, you'll know what a kind and gracious person he is. So we are so excited to have him moderate this panel. Now I will pass it to you, Donald, to introduce our panelists.
Oh, thank you, Denise. That's great. So let me introduce you to our 2 panelists. First, we have Meredith Koop. Meredith Koop is the stylist for Michelle Obama. She's an acclaimed fashion stylist. She's an image strategist and a consultant. Profiled in the New York Times, Vogue. She's really well known for her longtime work with Michelle Obama. Koop, she curated the content for the former ladies' message into impactful wardrobe during her tenure in the White House, and also the Becoming book tour. Koop also styles a select of powerhouse individuals. She brings her own intuitive, which I love, and thoughtful approach to everything she does for her clients. In addition to styling, the reason she's really here today, Koop really consults for brands and companies that aim to have a positive impact. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, Koop has drawn creativity from fashion while pursuing her additional passions in dance, psychology, and relocating in Chicago in 2003. That's where she got her high-end clothing boutiques fashion career start. And then also, let me introduce Amy Tsai. She is the Corporate Responsibility Director at PVH. PVH is the lifestyle owner of both Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. In this capacity, she is dedicated to uphold human rights and individually cross the supply chain and works cross-functionally to embed environmental sustainability in our business operations. And on a really fun side note, PVH just was ranked number 5 on the Barron's 100 most sustainable companies list of 2022. And it's number 1 for the apparel retail category in 2022. Prior to joining PVH, Amy was the first employee of a startup nonprofit seeking to transform the lives of the underprivileged in Hong Kong. She's worked to build synergies between local service agencies, NGOs, churches, multinational companies, corporate responsibilities departments. Amy, I'm happy you're here. Also, you have your MBA from Stern, so I love that we get to be balanced out, as well as your Master of Public Administration from the NYU Wagner Graduate School, and you have a Bachelor's of Art from Duke University. So let's start off. So, Amy, why are you interested in social responsibility in the fashion industry? And what about these last 2 years of this pandemic has affected your interest in social responsibility and sustainability in the fashion industry?
That's good. Donald, thank you so much for the introductions, and everyone. So grateful for the time that we have together this evening to chat. Personally, I think my interest in basically the social responsibility element within the fashion industry was a lot driven by personal experience. So as Donald had mentioned, I really started a lot of my career based in Hong Kong, where I was having a lot of engagement and exposure with families that had come from just very difficult economic situations. And a lot of the people that we were working with actually used to be factory workers in some of the factories from mainland China. And they had come back to Hong Kong to seek different types of opportunities for their families, for themselves personally. And I think that it became a very eye-opening moment to me of how many people's lives were actually impacted across the fashion industry as a board, right? It's not just those that work for these various multinational companies, it's those that are producing the clothes, those that are growing, the cotton, the input sources, those of us that are wearing it, right? It can affect us and kind of the statements we make about who we are or what our values are. And so it became really important to me to understand from the different angles, what is our area of influence as individuals, and then what is our area of influence as a collective. So I've been really grateful, I think, to have a chance to sit on both sides of the table. In some ways that I say it, I've seen like the downward impacts, both positive and negative from manufacturing, and then now having an opportunity to sit in PVH to look at it more from a policy and decision-making angle about our sourcing. It has been just, a great privilege, and I think I've learned so much throughout that process. But I think one of the questions that you flagged, Donald, is what about the last 2 years has really shaped or transformed, my understanding and idea of what's happening in the space and why I'm involved. And, quite frankly, I think for all of us, both in a personal and professional capacity, the past 2 years it's caused you to really think about what is most important, right? Who is it that you want to spend time with? Where do you want to focus your time and energy? Is the trajectory of your life going down the same direction that you thought it would? And, truth be told, I think many companies had to go through this same reckoning moment when they didn't have the same kind of revenue streams coming in that they did. And so what I've been, witnessing is that you have some companies that say, regardless of where we're at financially, we're going to continue to stand by certain commitments that we're making, and put that forward. And then you see, other organizations that are wrestling where what becomes optional, right? Or if you have to prioritize, what you're focusing on. And so for me, that's just been, an incredible opportunity to rethink. And you have to look at who are the decision makers in a company, right? What kind of different accountability mechanisms are in place to hold people up to the standards that they've committed to. And then where is it that it's really just driven by people's passion to push things forward? So I think for me personally, I see this as an inflection point in many ways within the fashion industry, because so many people have been impacted by COVID-19.
Yeah, I had a very similar introduction, of really seeing from the factory level how we really can touch communities. Meredith, I'm going to pose the same question to you. What are your interests in social responsibility? Where do they come from? And the past few years, how has that affected your interest in social responsibility and sustainability?
Big question. Well, thank you again for having me. It's great to see all of you. I really started thinking about clothing in a different way, I'd say around 2011, 2012. At the time, I was working in the White House. I was working with Mrs. Obama, and there was always such a response to like the J. Crew, the Gap, the Old Navy, like the Target. And I just started to look more into what that was. I grew up in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri, and going to Old Navy and shopping at Target and Payless was like all lined up in a strip mall. And I never thought about it. I never thought really about, exactly where clothes came from or what that meant. So for me, that I had a greater interest prior to that in the stories behind clothing, different designers, sort of like the social and ethical impacts there. But in terms of like the sustainability impact, that's when I really started doing my own research and trying to learn as much as I could, as basically whatever I could find, whoever I could talk to. And the last 2 years, I mean, like Amy said, so in such an articulate way, it's really drawn into focus what's important. I think another thing that's happened for myself personally and for some of my clients is like looking around at what you have and going, what is all this? Or do I want more or do I want less? Which I think is a key component to everything we're talking about, because fashion is all so tied to consumerism, that it's made me think a little bit differently about. I've also, just on a personal note, I've been moving around a lot, and when you move your stuff around, you start to sort of go, oh my God, I don't want all this stuff. So yeah. And I've also, like Donald was saying, I think one thing that I want to focus on tonight and where I speak from and sort of what my wheelhouse is working with women. I work with men as well, but mostly my clientele are women. And I see in real time what a lot of women of different age categories and different size categories are responding to or not responding to, and how their lives have changed during COVID, and sort of like how they're thinking about what they want to purchase or not purchase and all that. So
Yeah, well, I love our connection together. You have always talked to me about sustainability, and I also really enjoy that you have a much more intimate connection to people who wear it. And as Amy and I are very intimate in the operations and how it makes in the background, I love that your voice of what's happening with the consumer is equally important when it comes to sustainability and how we're going to do it together. So I'm going to jump back to Amy. Amy, we are talking about a giant industry that touches people's lives all around the world. So with a company like ours or large companies, what should there be a way that we measure or evaluate social responsibility in the fashion industry? And what would that look like? What could it be? A third party? Should it be a different organization? Should it be a government, or should it be internal for the organizations?
Donald, thank you so much for posing that question. And I'm sure it's something that everybody on this line has wrestled with, to some degree and varying capacities over the years. I think this space is really evolving. And I think for many of us, there's been a transition from where we've historically focused on what I would call like output measurement versus outcome measurement. And what I mean by that is that I think historically a lot of companies were being held to different kind of metrics of, how many like women did you train in something, or what does this look like? And, are you ensuring that you're paying factory workers X number of dollars? And I think where we're seeing a transition in this space is the next level of, so then what? Right? So you can say that you've trained those women. Did the training actually do something, right? Or was it just another activity that a company was facilitating? And, so that they could say that they put time and effort and check that box. And I think you raised a really interesting question, Donald, about then who becomes responsible for defining some of these metrics, who becomes responsible for the reporting cadence. And I would say it's a mixed bag. And the reason that I say this is that there's different levers that different kind of organizations can pull when it comes to influencing the trajectory that a company goes down, right? So I think first and foremost, obviously, we have government regulatory requirements. And what we've seen definitely in Europe is that there's been a lot more stringent reporting around things related to climate action that are continuing to evolve, things related to data privacy. And I think that having that gives a company, this kind of mandate, and they have to bring on resources to ensure that they're aligning kind of to those things. But to your point, I think there are certain cases when you're going into really specialized issues that if you don't have subject matter experts, right, that are either understand the situation on the ground or they understand a particular issue, that it's very challenging to just say, okay, all companies need to report on this, right? There needs to be some kind of guidance, some types of consultation where a company's speaking with them. And I think at the end of the day, there's, I think, different indicators across the board that all companies should be expected to address. But simultaneously, I would say it's important to challenge a company to figure out what is their issue, right? So if you are a swimwear company, are you doing more around water, right? Are you doing things related to training? Because that becomes this more personalized connection between a company and what they're doing in the social responsibility space and how they're reporting it. Because you don't want to transition into so much quantitative reporting that you're also losing the human element of what you're saying. But at the same time, I think the quantitative element does hold some accountability. So I know that it kind of not a black and white answer, but I think that that's something that we're learning in this space as different raters and rankers, different magazines are publishing, top X lists of this, governments are requiring different things. There's a time and space for it. But I think that at the same time, there needs to be the different groups coming together to figure out what is most materially important. Because sometimes when you have too much reporting, it's almost information overload, right? That doesn't enable consumers to see through kind of some of that noise and chaos as well.
Yeah, you're right. We do need a balance. And I mean, I do see this as maybe an unlock if there is some startups out there that can really help us navigate this. This could be something I think that could be a really big thing that could help everyone out going forward. And with that, Meredith, talking about an unlock in the industry. Now, from your side, interacting with people directly, what are some of the major challenges that the fashion industry, has right now that if we could unlock it, we could make a vast difference for both sustainability or social responsibility?
Well, it's tricky. Like I said, I work with so many different types of people that have different priorities when it comes to what they put on their bodies, how they want to look, what's important to them, how deeply they really want to even understand fashion in terms of the inner workings, or is it more just, oh, this is cute, which is a thing. So I think to your question, one thing that I think is really important, and I think that is often overlooked, is just focusing more on what the product is and the quality, the design, over leading with the message or leading with the story. Like for me, I have had countless fittings with people where I want to bring something to the table that I find deeply meaningful or is sustainable in a way that I think is really compelling. But if they don't like it and they don't feel good in it and it doesn't fit, or it requires a lot of alterations or whatever, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So for me, I think that the focus, especially for people that are thinking about doing something in the fashion space, is like, where are you bringing value in terms of the product? Like I was telling you guys the other day, like I have a lot of clients that need extended sizing, and it's very difficult to find extended sizing for certain not just events, but also where people are at in their lives, both financially and in their work. If they have a lot of disposable income and they have a lot of events and sort of public facing things, like it's very difficult to find clothes at that size. So I see a lot of gaps in my day to day, and I think about, you know, wouldn't it be great if someone could fill those gaps in a better way, in an ethical way, in a more sustainable way, while making the clothes great, like you put it on and you feel great and it fits. And I mean, that's the thing about fashion, like there's that seductiveness, there's that sexiness, and I don't mean like, oh, you look sexy, and I mean like it pulls you in, it hits you at a certain level that makes you feel really good about it. Not everyone has that relationship with clothes. I know there's people that are like, I don't care, I just, you know, whatever, it's utilitarian. But for me and for a lot of my clients, those are the things that I think about day to day. I see a lot of holes where I think people could be better served.
So actually, I feel like you're challenging me directly quite a bit as a designer. Make sure
Bring
and
it.
design, yeah, make sure and design sustainably and make sure things fit everyone. That is quite the challenge. From my point of view, getting size inclusive is very, very difficult when it comes to doing those size runs, and how do we like project how many size runs we need, and then not have a waste or you know, things going on discount from that. So anyone out there has any brilliant ideas?
I think the other thing is that I have a lot of empathy for people that are in design, because I see how hard it is. You know, size inclusiveness is not such an easy proposition. Like scaling a size up is, I tried just today. I was with someone with a dress, and the dress was a larger size. And so they made the neck absolutely huge, like it was out to here. You know, so there's so much that goes into clothing that I think people don't understand. It seems like a simple proposition, but what you do, what you guys do, it takes so much skill and research and time. And
yeah, well, that's why we're here today. I'm going to switch the topic over to maybe there's been a lot of talk about that resale can be something that brands can be doing. Resale seems to be part of an ecosystem. Amy, what do you think about resale, and how would it work for a large brand like ours?
Donald, thanks for posing that question. And I think it's one of these things where I'll say quite honestly, I think PVH is a little bit earlier on in this journey than, you know, maybe some of the other brands have been. But one of the key learnings that, you know, we've had is that it's not just about taking back the clothes, right? Because you still have to figure out what to do with them to divert them from waste if you're working towards truly circular models. And so this is where actually PVH has been looking to partner with some of the, you know, other external organizations, and whether that's kind of startups, you know, some more established organizations. The most kind of, I would say, prevalent pilot that we've been doing has been more based in Europe. So with specific stores that we have, we've been partnering with an organization there called the Renewal Workshop, specifically with Tommy Hilfiger, where we're asking consumers to bring clothing back to, you know, that they've worn back to our stores, and then working with the Renewal Workshop to figure out, okay, what from that's collected can be resold as is, what becomes repurposed into a new garment, right? So you deconstruct it, take it apart, use panels to sew into something else, or what from that you have to completely strip it down and it becomes feedstock, right, into something else and more of the material element. But quite frankly, it's challenging, right? Because I think over the years, there's so many different kind of material fibers that have evolved. They have different kind of uses, different kind of ability to, you know, be sustainable and withstand things. And there's also regional differences in terms of consumers' preferences around resale clothes. Like in some places it's really highly embraced, other places it's a bit taboo. And so it's the question of a lot of, and Donald, you can speak to this more than anyone, there are also regional differences in how something is designed to appeal to people that are living in that area. So when you're taking it back, you need to consider how are you putting it back into the economy in a relevant space, not that it just gets then dumped somewhere else, right? Which I think has been a lot of the criticism that's arisen in the fashion industry for like donations and take backs, is that it suddenly gets shipped from, you know, the Western countries to Africa, and then it destroys the economy, right, in Africa that they would have around some of the clothing. So, I say this, and, in all honesty, it's an area we're really excited about continuing to dive into and develop. I think it's also just thinking through what kind of circular business models become relevant in the regions in which we're operating, and how do we drive those to scale.
Yeah, it is interesting. I have had a few projects posed at me at work in the last few years where trying to recycle the garment, sometimes the fiber isn't 100% cotton, or the thread is polyester and we can't recycle it, and the shank or the button is stuck on and we have to figure out how to cut it off to make the recycling work. So there's something to it, but there is a little bit more work to be done. So let's, I'm going to shift it back to Meredith. Really, looking at the consumer behavior and clients, what would you say from your perspective would some steps we need to take to help the consumer shift their behavior away from fast fashion and maybe more into this kind of idea of upcycle, and what kind of things just in general could help that transition?
Yeah, I think, again, it varies so much across the board, because I think there are people where buying, a t-shirt that might not be the most sustainable thing is really the only option that they have for whatever reason, where they live, what their, how much money they make or have. So my policy with my clients who are not in that position, because they can pay me to do this for them, is I don't do that. I don't bring that in. There's certain things that are just, if they want to go off and do that on their own time, that's fine. But I don't bring that to the table. But it does fascinate me on several occasions when I've been working with someone new, that they'll sort of tell me about their wardrobe and then go, oh, and I love a deal. Like, I got these shoes from Zara. And I'm like, what? I'm just a little surprised that that's something that they're having a sense of accomplishment for, where it's like they don't need to get a deal, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So for me, again, I go back to this idea, I think, from what I see, and I could be wrong, I see a lot of companies that are sort of leading with sustainability to be marketed towards a younger generation, which is fine. But I often wonder, I like seeing someone like Eileen Fisher, bringing that a little bit more to the forefront. And she's someone that already has a very loyal client base, because she's consistent. Her clients kind of know what she's bringing to the table. It's across seasons. They know the fabrics, they know the fits. And that's kind of going back to the last thing that I was talking about, really thinking about what the clothing is. And then I think working backwards from there, because I don't know that you can really get consumer behavior to shift if the product isn't equal or better. A lot of people are not going to make that, let's call it a sacrifice, traumatic, but they're not going to choose that product, at least in my experience, which is, somewhat anecdotal. But I think that overall, people are going to want the thing that they want. They want the shiny, pretty thing that works for them. So I think it's really about developing a product. And I mean, some of the technology that I'm seeing is really interesting, and some new fabrications that I didn't know about that I'm seeing in swimwear or athletic wear. So I think it can only grow.
Well, some of the things I've really enjoyed between your and my conversations on this subject is, I personally have always seen the need of consumer shift to support the industry as we change, you've also pointed out that sometimes people are busy and can't always buy the things that are the most sustainable, or there's actual budgets going on with our consumer bases.
Yeah.
So I thank you again for pointing that out to me. It kind of keeps me in check and centered that it is part of all our responsibility as a globe, as a society. So I'm going to jump over to talk about some of my personal success here at being representative of Calvin Klein. When I first started designing in 2008, we really didn't have much presence in Pride or gay Pride, and something that's I'm very passionate about. I'm really happy to see that it's amplifying the voice, and that the message is being brought to the rural communities that I grew up in. Something I wouldn't have seen as a kid, and now I can imagine the kids now are seeing these messages. Well, there seems to be kind of a little bit of a conversation around, and maybe not kind of, there is a conversation around that that our branding, us leaning into it, is seen as disingenuous. And there's something really to that. So my real big question right now, I've been pondering a lot as I'm here in the office, is, how can companies support minority artists, including people of color, LGBTQ, other minorities? How can we support them without tokenizing them? Amy, would you care to try to answer that one?
Donald, I think first and foremost, thank you for sharing kind of from a personal angle, because I think with all of these questions, having that context and that narrative just really enables us to humanize elements of this. And I'm just really encouraged that that's been a shift, I think, for you in terms of your career. But what I would say is that, and we've talked about this a little bit between the two of us, is really thinking about what is the longer term way that a brand is seeking to advocate for this, right? Are you seeing it where it's very well-rounded, right? It's not just one splash, just as one style, one line, right, that's focusing on this one advertising campaign, but look at it holistically, right? How are they continuously trying to engage in dialogue, right? Whether that's drawing their consumers into some kind of a communication, ongoing dialogue about it, changing their board and their leadership, right? How do you make sure that the decision makers within a company are more representative of the people that you want to continue to support? I think it's also looking at, is the company on an ongoing basis supporting initiatives, right, related to seeking to advance and improve opportunities for these demographics. So you can look at a company's foundation, some of their corporate spending, where are they seeking to continue to source, and what suppliers are they looking for? And so that's, I think, from my perspective, when you want to think about the longer term change trajectory, you can't just from a one split moment in time say, oh, that brand has had a 180 revelation of they're suddenly pursuing something else, supporting people in a different way. I think it needs to stand the test of time, right? And I think it does require going back to the different communities that they're feeling like they're hopefully, being engaged in a different way and saying, is this effective? Is it not? And if so, I'm being willing to change course based on that.
Yeah, thank you. And Meredith, I'm gonna pose the same question to you from your perspective. What can brands do that can support minority artists, people of color, and the LGBTQ communities, other minorities, that can really help support everyone without tokenizing everyone?
Well, I'm not part of a brand, so my opinion, I guess, is just, observation, or my just basic opinion, but observing, I guess, some of the missteps a lot of brands have taken. I don't know if that's the right word, but over many years, I mean, there's a lot. Just pick a designer, Google them, you'll find something. I think that, the best way to be authentic and genuine is to be authentic and genuine. And I think people want opportunities to be heard and to be paid. So, I know personally people that have been asked to do things or participate in, campaigns or public facing things because of who they are or the demographic that the brand thinks that they'll represent. And in some cases, the compensation isn't there, the respect isn't there. And so I think that it's a real human thing, and it's a real individual thing. So when you say brands and corporations, I see how that can easily get lost when there's so many people in the mix and shareholders and all of that stuff. So I don't, just from what I've seen or what I have put together, it seems that, giving people credit, giving people voice, giving people fair, generous compensation. And Amy, as you were talking about, the consistency of that.
Yep. Meredith, you've hit this home a few times to me, but your statement of really empowering people's voices to come through it, I think that's something that we should be paying attention to. And I don't think that's just the fashion industry. I think all business, we're all kind of coming to the same place where we're wanting to do the good thing, and maybe we're not doing our best. Maybe what you're saying is super important as an outsider of the brand is we need to be empowered, need to be paid, you need to be empowered to speak. And then, so some of my other experiences, for almost 20 years now, I've spent a lot of time on the ground in factories in developing nations. And one of the things I've really seen is the impact of going in and setting up industry in some towns across the world, which can have really great impact. Drinking water, schools, vibrant community centers. I've also seen, because have experience now of decades, that I've seen that different businesses can actually move away from those communities that they've already set up, kind of leaving a vacant hole that really wasn't there beforehand. It's this part of how does a corporation, how does our organization be ethic? How do we set this up? And then what responsibility do we have? And this is a question I pose, and I don't ever expect anyone to be able to really answer it because it's such a complex answer. But, it's bigger than fashion. How does all companies, now that we're becoming globalized, what is our responsibility to the communities we touch around the world? Amy, would you like to take my very difficult question?
Yeah, Donald, I feel like that there's so many different ways that we can look at this, right? And from an ethics perspective too, it's just where do you engage? Where do you lean in? Where is it that you recognize that this is, a broader consideration? And I would say just 2 points, against this that I would really, from, my personal perspective, as well as just from understanding the way that work has evolved. I think first and foremost, anytime a new organization is or new company is moving into a new setting, is you have to understand the context in which you're operating, right? And what that means is you don't come in with this, I'm going to change exactly how everything's run. You need to come in engaging local stakeholders, right? Whether that's NGOs, local government, understanding the dynamics at play, understanding the economic factors, education opportunities, and how do you become part of that narrative as opposed to the only narrative? Because I think, to your point, Donald, there is that risk, right? If you are not committed to staying there over the long run, and for whatever reason, if something goes awry, those are people's lives, right? That's not just this is now like a business decision, we need to make an exit, and then suddenly an economy collapses. And I think, what's really interesting is you see this across the board, right? I would say even in a university setting, there's a lot of small towns, right, or certain communities where people are hired to have different roles in a university, right? Everything from staff members to operations to cleaning. And like, if university goes under, so much of the town's economy is dependent on that. And so one of the, the learnings that I've had both from my time with the nonprofit as well as, now my time with PVH is are you engaging, right, with the local community and the people that are there in the long run to help you make decisions? Because if you're not, that's a miss, right? There's kind of cultural considerations, there's infrastructure considerations, and I think that no one has done this perfectly by any means. But the truth of the matter is that the community leaders are able to speak more to what they're seeing than an external party, right, who's coming in for a point in time. And so that would just be, I think, my initial take on it. It's not the answer, by any means, but I think that it's a start where you're having more consideration for things outside of yourself as an entity than if you were to operate otherwise.
I do actually believe we have more visibility of this, and that we have a lot to offer the other industries on this specific subject. And I'm running out of time. Sorry, that is definitely my fault. As everyone who's ever met me, and most of you have, that seems to be my normal way of running things. We have a few minutes left, and I have a few extra questions. Meredith, I have a quick question. Maybe you can answer this. Do you know of any brands out there that are making some or designers out there that are making some big statements towards urging people to be more mindful or themselves be mindful?
Could you be more specific? Mindful of what?
Well, just be mindful of, so sustainability or just social responsibility. Are there some good brands out there?
I mean, there's a lot of, I think what's great about what's happening, what I'm seeing is, with all the pitfalls of social media, I'm seeing more brands than ever. Learning about new brands through post e-commerce sites. There are so many. I mean, you can truly, if you just have an interest, there's so many different brands that you can learn about. I'll be honest, as far as the bigger companies and corporations, I think it's really hard, I think a lot of people have made statements or proclamations over the last few years or recently. And I feel like because I'm so much from the consumer perspective, I'm kind of the link in a way. I never really know what's going on behind the scenes, even if somebody tells me something. So I try to do my own research as much as possible. And I try my best to work with smaller brands or support smaller brands. Sometimes it's harder because of cost or fit or style or whatever. But there's just, I think this is a wonderful time in that there's so much available.
That's great. Well, thank you. That is exactly at time. So for my last minute, I'm just going to spend a minute and plug the SLEB ethics board that I'm a part of. So it's the Student Leader in Ethics Board at Columbia Business School. And we're trying to bring a rich community around ethical dilemmas to the business community. And today was obviously around fashion. If anyone out there has some more they would like to add or like to contribute to it, please reach out, or please reach out to any of us on the board. But again, thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Amy. Thank you all. And I believe together we can do this.